So we're going to do something a little different that's unrehearsed. I had a brief presentation that would be half of the time allotted, and then it was going to be a Q&A, and then we'd open it up to Q&A, but we've decided we're going to make it interactive the whole way through. And so it's unrehearsed, so we're going to see how this is going to work.
But we'll start with Michael showing us a couple of slides.
Yeah. So what I wanted to start with is we've heard at this conference and many others that it's the fourth industrial revolution, it's the fourth revolution. Some have said it's the third revolution. Some have said it's the modern day renaissance that we're living in. And what I'm here to say is disruption and change is the new norm. And what you're looking at here is productivity. And the idea that we're in this digital revolution and we are accelerating productivity around the world. And at the same time that is happening, and you can see that on this chart, you're looking at a population growth which is going to be quite amazing. Now, that brings its own set of challenges relative to building sustainable futures in a lot of the social needs that we face around the world, and a lot of what we think the intelligence of things can solve for. And the reason we call it IoT, the intelligence of things, is the internet has been around for about 25 to 30 years, and this is really about smart nodes connecting, delivering incredible capability relative to data, and eventually that data and that those smart nodes won't just be about operability of a device, but it's going to move into productivity, optimization, predictability, and eventually it will move to cognitive capabilities, and then eventually into artificial intelligence. And so for us, it's an extraordinary time to live in, but again, with great disruption. And what do we see today here as you look at this slide is that we have a more disruptive, dispersed supply chain. You're going to see that become even more complex, and what is going to become incredibly important relative to that dispersed, sort of regionalized supply chain is the ability to build in visibility and velocity. Velocity is going to be critical. It's going to be the competitive advantage for many, many companies. So as you think about velocity in a much more complex world where there are more events taking place that can disrupt the actual supply chain of a company, this idea of smart, intelligent nodes that are not only being built into products, but being built into the systems, the manufacturing processes, and the automation will become incredibly important. We're also going to see at the same time growth in the middle class. So as you looked at the population and you looked at that growth chart, the middle class is going to grow substantially. We're going to bring more people out of poverty. 60% of that will happen in Asia. As that happens, you're going to have more buying power, and that buying power is going to create the need for certainly mass customization, if not personalization, in the product, which means you're not going to be able to create a product in one market and force it into another. And so you're going to see this increased regionalization. We're also seeing a tremendous growth in Asian OEMs. Let's make no mistake, the Chinese are innovating, and they are innovating at a pace that we have not seen. And so as you think about the disruption coming from China, you're certainly going to see more innovation coming from China than you have ever seen in the past, and that's happening in real time today. We're also seeing faster product life cycles. And at the same time we're seeing these faster product life cycles based on consumer demand, we're also seeing condensed innovation cycles relative to technology. So everything's becoming faster, and that's why I was talking about the need for velocity as you get to market. We're seeing more disruptive products, and there's a lot of reasons why, and I'll cover some of those, why you're seeing more disruptive products come to market than we've ever seen before. We're seeing new hardware OEMs, Amazon, Alibaba, Google, Facebook. They're all moving into hardware. They're developing themselves as new hardware OEMs. So as you combine hardware, software, and the data and the analytics, they're building platforms and ecosystems. And that is something that's fairly new. And innovation is certainly on the rise, and you can certainly see that displayed here at a conference like this as well.
I'm gonna try our format and just
Yes.
rudely interrupt you
Yes.
against all my British instincts. On interruption, on innovation in sectors. How much are sectors going to stay in their silos, and how much sort of would you expect cross-sectoral innovation to start happening?
A great question. You're going to see convergence of industries, and we can give you some examples of those, and we'll take healthcare and medical. Traditional companies that were in medical, and then you had traditional companies that were maybe in healthcare. And as you start to see this sort of convergence of this technology, where do you draw the line between a smart medical device, right, and a healthcare device that starts to offer what the medical devices offer? And then you get into sort of the ownership of that data, and is there regulatory control over some of that functionality? So you're certainly going to see that, and I'll give you a prime example. When you listen to Mark Fields, who's the CEO of Ford Motor Company, and he says, I'm not just in the automotive business anymore, I'm in the mobility business. And he's already talking and thinking about how the car connects to the home, how the car connects to the person. Certainly, you get into vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure, but that's all autonomy. But he's also talking about the home, and he's talking about mobility in general. And then they sort of address, will everyone need to own a car as you think about urbanization, which is happening as well. So when you listen to that, you say, well, that's a very different company than it was. So who is it competing with? And who is it going to compete with? And so I think you're going to see, to your point, just incredible disruption in the industries and in the competitive sets and in the business models. So when you look at certain business models, the way they were developed, those are going to shift and change in how things get monetized. And then you're going to say, who's my competitive set? That's going to look very different than it did. And what are those products and services I'm going to offer? They're going to be probably very different as well in this new world. And we'll move on, because the intelligence of things, it's really about like trillions of small little devices, sensors, actuators that are embedded into almost any tangible product, that are providing what I like to say instantaneous sort of information. And again, as that moves into cognitive capability, we're going to see a lot of these different products and services solving for real-world problems. And many of you have seen these numbers. By 2020, the intelligence of things will bring over 50 billion connected devices. Today, you're at about 10 billion. And there's certain things that are creating this phenomenon. One of them is sort of Moore's Law that we talk about relative to scale and costs. These sensors are almost costing pennies, if that. You're seeing all of the product being miniaturized and the computational power, the processing power increasing. And so now they can be pervasive. They can be in almost anything. They become ubiquitous and incredibly accessible. So the power has shifted clearly to the consumer in this environment, and the consumer is sort of dictating some of these changes. And a lot of that is driven by this dramatic increase in the computing power that we talked about, diminishing barriers that we've seen to connectedness, the shrinking of the technology, and the shift of your proposition from just pure connection to intelligence to AI. And this is creating this huge explosion that we're seeing. And the opportunity is everywhere. We've seen numbers of 7.1 trillion as the total addressable market. We've heard everything up to, I think maybe it was a McKinsey report, to 11 trillion. It's impacting every industry. There's not one industry here that doesn't get impacted by this phenomenon. And these technologies are transforming business as you know it. The information's free, it's real time, anywhere, anyone, the mobility piece of this. And cloud. Cloud has certainly brought on this change as well. So you have this confluence of miniaturization, processing power going up, costs coming down, and now you have this thing called cloud computing, which will be the new standard. and it's allowing anyone to sort of connect in and build platforms, build ecosystems as a service. So to prepare for this, there's a lot of things being addressed right now relative to infrastructure, standardization, and security. These are some of the big things that the industry has to focus on as you think about interoperability, when you think of all these devices that are smart and connected. Standardization, will we have some sort of standards? There's at least 16 different radio transmitters. I don't think we're going to have 16 different things in your home to connect your home and make it ubiquitous. Agility and speed become a competitive advantage in the age of intelligence. You're going to see a need for far more cloud-based solutions as you think of these 50 billion data will be run on cloud apps by 2019. Today that number, and we were talking, is at 5%. So you're going to see this extraordinary growth in this space. 50% plus of all new applications developed will be platform as a service, and they're going to be IoT-centric by 2020. And we're going to add another 68 billion to the current 1.7 by 2026. So, just extraordinary growth. And a little anecdotal, I was with the senior product development executive from Qualcomm, and someone asked him, how real is this IoT thing? And if you took out sort of all the mobile devices, whether those are smartphones, tablets, et cetera, and you looked at just their business today, what they do in IoT today versus 3 years ago is pretty extraordinary. He quoted a number of $1.6 billion in the chips that were going into just IoT product. And I think Intel has some pretty extraordinary numbers as well in this space. So it's really going to reshape our thinking and how we think today. You're certainly going to see, increases in the infrastructure piece of this. This is 32.8%. So the CAGRs that we're seeing in all of these numbers are pretty extraordinary. And the pace at which that change is happening is very fast.
Michael, the pace is fast, the numbers are incredibly impressive, and you say them with a certainty, which is admirable. How equally spread is this revolution? If you look at the world, so where is it actually happening, both in terms of sectors and in terms of geographies?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think what you should do is separate the public sector from the private sector. And we most recently did a study that we fielded, which we're going to share this coming week. And what that shows is there's a pretty enormous gap between the public and the private sector. And what we mean by that is the sort of state of readiness, the capabilities, the infrastructure needed to support it. And in that study, it's like 6.5 to 7 years IT professionals believe the gap is between the public and the private sector. So we'll start there. So there's this enormous gap. So as you think about semi-autonomous cars or autonomous cars, and you look at this gap, well, there's an infrastructure gap here that's got to be closed. And so one, there's a real need for public sector, private sector cooperation in this space to try to close that gap. And then we see certain industries moving quicker. Healthcare is one of the fastest moving industries in IoT. We think you're going to see some extraordinary product coming out that's going to solve for real-time health issues. And when you think about the fact that we monitor a lot of systems with these sensors, the one system that's probably the most important is your own personal health. And many of you probably go once or twice to the physician a year, and you have one set of data points. The bands, these fitness trackers, and the bands that you're starting to see come out that are going to have more and more capabilities and more sensors in them are going to actually monitor your health in real time. And it's going to give you real-time data points on a lot of different metrics. as you go through your day, as you go through your workouts. And that's going to provide us with very useful data points as you start to aggregate some of that data that's going to start to give us some kind of real predictability about your own personal health. So we like to say that the consumer sector, and I think this is where you were going with the question, is one of the fastest movers. Now, there's a lot more gimmickry and novelty in some of the product in the consumer sectors, but the actual development and the innovation within the sensors and the capabilities of the processors that are going into some of these products as a core underlying technology can be pulled and used elsewhere, such as a medical device, that becomes very useful and very interesting. So we never sort of look at the consumer sector as just sort of novelty. We look at it as where true innovation's happening that you can pull across into the other industries and actually use. But healthcare is one of the earliest movers.
Thanks.
And the lines, you had talked about this earlier, the blurring of the lines between the industries, this convergence that's going to happen is going to really disrupt the business models and disrupt industries. We talked a little bit about this, so I'll skip this. The interoperability, this becomes really, really important. Yeah. And there are products out there that actually give you the ability to have interoperability amongst a lot of different kind of product. One of those is a Wink product where the state of New York has picked Schenectady, New York as a smart city, and they're actually using that product that actually can read those 16 different type of radio transmitters quite well and pull in the infrastructure within the city and make it a smart city. And so that's under development and will be a beta. It's going to be very interesting to watch. So you're going to see the industry really go after this interoperability piece in a real way, whether it's for your home, for a smart city, a smart grid, a smart energy grid, et cetera. This just shows you that it's real. And we talked a lot about the numbers, but the numbers are what they are, and you're going to see this sort of extraordinary growth take place across the board in these industries and in these different sectors. And this is how fast it really is happening. So as a result, you're going to see the need for open or collaborative innovation, and we're seeing more and more of this. We work in 12 industries as a company, and we say we go sketch to scale, so design, engineering, co-innovation, manufacturing, forward reverse logistics. We can go the full gamut of commercialization. And what we're seeing is more and more companies are coming saying, we need the visibility, but we also need the velocity. And because all of these product life cycles are shrinking and the innovation cycles are getting shorter, we need a partner. We can't do all the R&D ourselves. One, it's too costly. Two, we can't stay in front of the change that's happening. And so we're seeing more and more companies, whether they're startups and or large Fortune 10 companies, want to partner and co-innovate. And they actually embed their teams with our teams as you go to market. And we're seeing more and more of this. So I think you're going to see the need for strategic partnerships as a key advantage strategically in innovation. And you're going to hear more and more about collaborative innovation. You're going to hear more and more about who owns what relative to the IP as you think about this open innovation. And that's going to evolve and change. And you're going to see, I think, brands take more risk in this space so that they can have the velocity to get to market. And so it's basically, you know, are you guys ready for this sort of massive disruption that's here? It's going to continue, and the speed at which it's going to continue is pretty extraordinary.
Thanks, Michael. We're gonna open it up to a few quick questions. Amazing, you've managed to squeeze right through that.
Oh, God.
No, we're just going to ignore that for a second. Are there any questions in the room? Whilst you think about them, I've actually got one. I don't see any hands up yet. So, there's a gentleman over there. Why don't you go first?
Well, Jacob von Uxkel from the World Future Council. You know, obviously many of these things sound very exciting, but you know, there are parts of your talk which reminds me more of a sort of new religious or dictatorial movement. You know, you talk about reshaping our thinking and, you know, controlling the real world, etc. And I think you need to accept that many people who are not just skeptical about this, they actually don't want it. And if you're going to go to Japan, for example, which is one of the first nations to embrace these new technologies, many young Japanese are saying, this is fake, anything we can create in seconds, we don't want it. And I think you need to, be aware that there are people who want more and more, and they still want people-to-people contact, and they're going to reject much of this, because if you're not aware of this, you may risk the same collapse as, before 2008, people thought financial innovation, global financial innovation is unstoppable, that is the future, where it turned out not to be that. So I think a bit much, I would recommend you to be a bit less certain and be aware that this is not the future everybody wants, and that if you talk about consumers, you need to give these people who don't want it a space for their life and their lives too.
Well, I think what you're going to see is, as you looked at the charts of the population growth, and you look at consumption going up, there's real needs, there's real social needs. By 2050, you can't feed the world, right? So whether you want the change or not, there's going to be constraints on natural resources. There's going to be concerns around how do we feed the world at that point, and the IoT, or the intelligence of things that we're seeing already develop in smart agriculture, are actually solving for that. So I'll give you, for instance, there's sensors now. Because of the cost of those sensors and the information they're transmitting, you can actually put them into the ground, and you only water where the moisture is needed relative to the plants. You only fertilize where it's specifically needed. And all of a sudden, you start reducing waste 30, 35%, 40%. You start to build a sustainable future. That's just one example. I'll give you another example. Automotive. 96% of all automobile accidents are caused by human error. There's $1 trillion spent on auto repair. And just in the US alone, 30,000 deaths are caused by this. So when you think about semi-autonomy and autonomous cars, and the idea that these sensors can actually maneuver and drive and solve for the 96%, so you reduce that to 3%, you're reducing the cost to the consumer, right? So I guess my point is, there's real-world benefits relative to this idea of a smart, connected world. And I'm not talking the novelty and the gimmickry, but I'm talking about solving real-world problems. And the technology now, because it is so cost-effective and powerful, you can really put it anywhere and start to solve for some of these problems. And I think we owe it, as technologists and as people that are developing and innovating in this space, we owe it to society to solve for those issues. So I think you're going to find that if you're providing a solution to a consumer, you're making their lives simpler, easier, whether it's at work, play, the home, personally, they're going to adopt it. And we've seen that. So I would leave you with that.
Michael, very quickly before we end, lots of people will disagree on whether, like the gentleman here, whether this new world is desirable or not, and how close you want it to come to your life, right? And you seem to say it's almost inevitable because of all the benefits. Do you see any bears on the road? I mean, what could disrupt this disruption?
For sure there are bears on the road. I would say one is the interoperability piece, two, the security piece, the privacy security piece. There are very real issues here as you start to think about 50 billion devices connected into an infrastructure that can't support 50 billion devices. And so I think you're going to see some new technologies get developed here, which are going to be quite interesting. One of those is mesh technology. And I'm pretty excited about this idea of device-to-device and mesh technologies. You're going to hear a lot more about mesh technology from probably all of the big IT players. It's something we're focused on. But as a piece of that, the security and the privacy of the data relative to these devices is going to be critical. It is an issue, and the issue has not been solved.
On that note, you'll have to come back next year. We've got flashing lights. So ladies and gentlemen, Michael, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.